Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is the March edition of the Borough of Sport Forum. I'd just like to introduce myself because this is my forum, so I'm first forum as well, and I'm really looking forward to it. My name's Anthony Hopkins. I'm the Director of Culture, Sport and Libraries for the London Borough of Merton. So just been working on the Borough of Sport initiative for just over almost 10 months now. But I have quite a history in the borough and have worked for the London Borough of Merton for 27 years. And some of you may know me from my libraries work. But I'm just introducing today's Borough of Sport Forum, which is really a forum to share information and updates around the Council's Borough of Sport initiative, but most importantly, to share best practice and information across different groups and interested parties who are on the call today. So the example of some of the representatives we've got on the call today include sports clubs, interested residents, and other organisations that support and deliver in the borough. This is a webinar, so you only see the presenters and the people who are speaking for each one. And for today, we've got a particular focus, as well as the regular updates and discussion and reflections on where we are, but also the plans for the future. We'll also be having some guest speakers today to particularly focus around safeguarding and welfare, which is a really crucial element in our Borough of Sport delivery and ensuring that everybody has safe access to sporting and exercise opportunities across the borough. Before we go into the speakers, I'm just going to go on to a bit of reflection, really, just in terms of some of the achievements that we've delivered over the last year. Firstly, just wanted to flag up, if you want some further reading on this, in January, a full council report nearing 30 pages was submitted that outlines all of the work that's been delivered since the Borough of Sport initiative launched in 2023. And just some of these are just some of the recent highlights and some of the things and reflections that were reflected in that report. Firstly, we had our second big sports day at Wimbledon Park last September, 6,741 attendees, which is 25% up from last year, and big plans to improve upon that for this year. This year's book sports day will be on the 7th of September at Morden Park. To date, investment into sport and physical activity has totaled over 2.38 million since the Borough Sport ambition began. And what I want to emphasise is that it's 2.38 million pounds of funding that's coming in from external bodies. This is not council funding. This is funding that's been drawn down from organisations such as Sport England, London Sports, the LTA, that's invested in a number of facilities projects, and as well as activities and developments and opportunities to increase activity to our residents across the borough. And one of the key things when we launched with our Borough of Sport initiative was our activity finder, which is our web portal that enables anyone to find out about all the amazing activities and physical activities that take place across the borough. And over 90 organisations have so far uploaded sessions, and over 24,551 unique searches have been undertaken since September 2023 by residents. And we've almost concluded the first year of our Borough of Sport grant fund. So £1 million going into, sorry, not £100, £100,000. That would be great if it was £1 million. So £100,000 has been in the receipt of 23 organisations to deliver grassroots development and sports development opportunities across the borough. So it's just a few reflections, and we're going to go into our speakers in a moment. As I said, this is a webinar, so if you do want to ask questions, if you could just pop them into the chat. We do tend to get quite a lot of questions as part of these webinars, so we will try and prioritise the most frequently asked questions and try to get through as many as possible. But as I said, today's forum particularly focuses on safeguarding and welfare, and I really wanted, so we've got 4 speakers now who are going to be talking about this, and the first person I'd like to hand over to is John Shelley, who is the London Borough of Merton's local authority designated officer. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, so if we could just go on to the next slide. My name's John Shelley, as Anthony says. I'm the LADO, or Local Authority Designated Officer for Merton Children's Services. This really is just a brief overview of the role. Every local authority is required to have a LADO or a small team. Usually that person is social work qualified, and the purpose is to receive allegations and concerns about members of the children's workforce or volunteers as well. It's a statutory role, and the important documents really that underpin the work, as you can see there, keeping children safe in education, but also Chapter 7 of the London Child Protection Procedures. We work closely with police, with employers, children's services, and various regulatory bodies as well. We don't investigate, we oversee, and we coordinate the allegation process. So in a sense, we're facilitating a strategy for managing the allegation as it comes into us. Next slide, please. So this is the threshold criteria that we would work to, and we ask that you make a referral within 1 working day. In respect to those cases where it's alleged that a person who works with children or volunteers with children has behaved in a way that has harmed or may have harmed a child, possibly committed a criminal offence against or related to a child, behaved towards a child in a way that indicates they may pose a risk of harm to children, or behave in a way that indicates they may not be suitable to work with children, or discriminated against the child on the basis of one of their protected characteristics. We also receive allegations, concerns around historic abuse, which we would respond to in the same way as we would any contemporary concern or allegation. Yes, so in terms of a distinction between allegations and concerns, we do make a distinction. Obviously, we need to apply the procedures sensibly and proportionately. You know, we would say that the incident has to be serious enough for harm to have been caused, or that the individual poses a risk of harm to children. So, for example, was there a mark on the child? Was there intent to harm the child? Is there a credible and consistent version of events from that child? Or perhaps was this behaviour management by that staff member, but with the intention of preventing harm? So perhaps a child was maybe held because there was impending harm, or they were going to harm another child or themselves. If it's the latter, if it's a concern rather than allegation, then normally we would advise the employer to deal with that matter internally. So the next slide. The 4th bullet point on the harm threshold that I talked about on the 2nd slide relates to private life concerns. So where somebody in their private life behaves in a way that suggests they could pose a risk of harm to children. So here we're talking about arrest for perhaps a violent or a sexual offence. Perhaps their own child has become subject to child protection procedures. And that 4th bullet point that you can see there, closely associated with someone in their personal lives, probably I shouldn't have included that for the sports forum, because that's really only applicable in domestic settings where children are looked after in domestic settings, so such as childminding or foster care. Okay, next slide, please. So it's really 3 strands that we oversee. So they are either a police investigation, children's services inquiries. Sorry, if you press again, they should come up with 3 strands. I'm hoping they come. Yeah, police investigation, children's services inquiries about whether or not a child is in need of protection or in need of services, and then that 3rd bullet point there would be where we think an employee could, or an employer rather, could deal with the the allegation or the concern, and we can often support them and have oversight in relation to that. We usually, one point to make there, we would usually wait for the police to complete their investigation before asking an employer to undertake their own investigation or inquiry. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just in terms of the process, what I would say is that most of the referrals that we get to the service don't reach the harm threshold, and we're given advice and consultation on a range of issues to your organisation, either on safer recruitment, risk assessment, safety planning. But if the threshold is met, we will have an allegations meeting, and ultimately that meeting will be arriving at an outcome, and usually that outcome is based on the balance of probability. So is the behaviour more likely to have occurred than not? Because we have lots of instances where the police are handing information back to us where there's not a realistic prospect of a conviction, but they're saying that they are concerned about a particular individual. And the significance of an outcome is that if something is substantiated, then we're normally suggesting, or the procedures state, that that individual should be dismissed and consideration of a barring referral. Next slide. So that's just a summary, really. So we provide advice, information and guidance regarding allegations, concerns against paid and unpaid workers. We manage and oversee individual cases at any one time. This is Merton employees or Merton volunteers. We capture the voice of the child, make sure that they're safeguarded. There's risk assessment and safety planning. We try and deal with things in a timely fashion, in a fair and thorough process, because we appreciate how stressful this is for individuals. And I think the final slide. So really that's us. So we're based in the Civic Centre on the 12th floor. I'm full-time. Christine Dyson covers on a part-time basis, and there you've got our details, and at the bottom is a link to our page on the MSCP website, which just gives some useful guidance and an overview of what we do. So that's me. Thanks for your time, and I'm going to hand over to Catherine.
Hi, thank you very much, John. I will just start by introducing myself. My name is Catherine Dunn, and I am the manager of the Merton Safeguarding Adults Board. So I'm here to talk to you a bit about safeguarding adults. If you can move to the next slide, please, Yana. So firstly, just to start off, I'm going to tell you a bit about the Safeguarding Adults Board, what we do, and how this relates to the kind of Borough of Sport. The Safeguarding Adults Board is a multi-agency partnership that has a statutory obligation to make sure that here in Merton we have effective arrangements in the borough to make sure adults with care and support needs are protected from abuse and neglect. So an adult could have care and support needs for a range of different reasons. Perhaps they are elderly and they have some kind of cognitive impairment or ill health or physical disability. The adult could have a learning disability, maybe a physical disability, perhaps mental health needs, a long-term health condition, or perhaps they have challenges with misuse of drugs and alcohol. And as a consequence of these care and support needs, that adult is more vulnerable to abuse and neglect and perhaps unable to protect themselves. So that's where safeguarding adults comes in. And as I've included here, and as I'm sure you're aware, safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So that's why it's kind of really important to have a bit of an understanding and know what to do and where to go if you have concerns. So I am not going to dwell too much on the structure of the Safeguarding Adults Board, but what is important to note is that we do have a range of different organisations that are involved that all have a really key role in safeguarding adults in the borough, essentially ensuring that we have a joined up approach and that we work effectively as the system. So we have a strategic plan with key priorities and a range of work that we take through our subgroups, but I'm not going to dwell on that today. What I'm going to focus on is what I think is maybe kind of most relevant to the Borough of Sport work and to your role perhaps as sports organisations and community members in supporting and protecting adults at risk. So I'm going to focus on our training offer and also on our community champions network. If you want to move to the next slide, Yana. So the Safeguarding Adults Board has level 1 training that is available online. This is open. What is great about this is that it's open to everybody. So it could be for community groups, it could be for a particular organisation, but also it's open to members of the public. It's very much about raising awareness, about having a basic understanding of adult safeguarding, spotting the signs of abuse and neglect, and most importantly, knowing what to do. And for us as a Safeguarding Adults Board, we have felt it's really important to have that basic training that's there, that's accessible, and in particular for organisations that might be on this call, that maybe have volunteers or members of the public that what they work with, that might want to build some of their knowledge around safeguarding adults. This is a really good set of training that is there and available for you. So I would really encourage you to take a look, because having an understanding and knowing what to look out for is absolutely key to making sure that we catch signs of abuse and neglect early and make sure that that person is supported and protected from any risk of harm. And I'm going to move on to our Community Safeguarding Adult Champions Network. So this was established about 3 years ago. And the idea of the Safeguarding Adults Champions Network is it was very much about us as a board strengthening our engagement with community. But the important thing was that we get those core messages about safeguarding adults out into the community, but that we also, I suppose, foster a network of champions that can help us take those messages out, give us an insight into some of the challenges that people are facing in their local communities, and also providing a bit of a forum for those that are working in maybe safeguarding leads in their organisations to share and learn and be up to date about key safeguarding issues. And that's very much what I think is a benefit that we've heard from those that are involved in the network. We have people from the general public, but also we have people from different local organisations, and they say actually it's really helpful where there may be designated safeguarding leads that they can, you know, maybe share best practice, share common concerns, and also be up to date and learn more about maybe key issues to look out for and improve their own policies and processes. And it's quite an informal network, and raising awareness is a really important part of what we do, including some of our work during National Safeguarding Week. So it's a call to get involved because it's a really good network, and it's building the representation is a really important thing for us to do, so that we have basically as many people as we can from organisations across the borough that all kind of joined together in the network and committed to safeguarding adults in our community. So just moving on to the next slide. One thing that I just wanted to highlight is that we did film a safeguarding awareness video with our champions at our last our Safeguarding Adults Champions Network a couple of years ago. And this is very much a short film that's about raising awareness, getting those core messages out. I won't play it now due to, as we've got other colleagues that will be speaking, but I believe if the slides are to be circulated, then you can have a look at it and watch it online. It's also in the Safeguarding Adults Board website, but it gives a bit of flavour about how we're trying to get some of those core messages out there to local communities. So turning next to safeguarding adults in sport, I just have some simple messages that I thought I'd kind of pass on about what's kind of really important to be considering. Firstly, knowing what to look out for, and that's partly where some of the training and using different resources comes in. There are many different types of abuse and neglect, from physical abuse, financial exploitation, but also issues such as self-neglect. And it's really important to know what to look out for. And in particular, where maybe is thinking from a sports lens, where you might have a relationship with someone, you're seeing them on a regular basis, you're a trusted person, you might be the first to spot that something's wrong. So it's really important you kind of know what to look out for, and also you know where to go if you've got concerns. The second point is to understand that there will be many barriers for adults in reporting and seeking help. This could be due to fear, intimidation, could also be about shame or being worried about the consequences, in particular if the person is the perpetrator of the abuse or neglect is a friend or family member. So it's really important to bear this in mind and understand why there might be those barriers to seeking help. So as I've said before, it's really important that if you have concerns about an adult, that you share these, that you tell someone. For sports organisations, please make sure that you have robust processes and policies in place, in particular that are specific to adults, as there are different similarities but also key differences between safeguarding children and adults, in particular around legislation and the steps that are taken. So please make sure that you have that in place, as many resources are out there to help you in doing so, but also that's where the support from the Safeguarding Adults Board and other organisations can come in. And important is involving that person as far as possible. It's important to listen to them, what they want to happen. And lastly, knowing how and when to contact the local authority safeguarding team is key. If you've got a concern, but also maybe if you want to get some advice, if you've got some concerns, but you actually want to sort of run past them, you want to get a bit of advice, then please know the details on how to contact the team, because it's important to act rather than perhaps not act, and that adult is more at risk or experiences harm. So I will tie up there, but just to highlight, we have a lot of additional information on our website, so please do go on to the Safeguarding Adults Board website. I've included the information about how to report a safeguarding concern, but you can also access this on the Merton Council website. Following on from John's previous presentation, I also want to highlight that we have a framework around allegations against persons in positions of trust. The process is slightly different when it comes to adults, but it's really important to know the right process and what actions to take if you are an organisation where you might be coming across those allegations and those concerns. So happy to take any further questions at the end, and I believe I'm passing over to Julia now.
Apologies. I'm Julia Mlambo. I work in the Merton Children's Safeguarding Partnership, and our role and our work is very similar to Catherine's, so I won't go into too much detail about the structure, but obviously, unlike Catherine, we look and support at children. So first slide, please. Okay, so the Merton Children's Safeguarding Partnership, we are statutory partnerships, so every local authority or sort of local authority area has one, and our job is to make sure that the police, health and education services all work together in a cohesive way to support children and to make sure that their welfare is protected. Our main work centres around developing policies and procedures, so we're not a direct support service, but what we're there to do is to make sure that all the organisations that work in Merton, that includes the voluntary sector, that includes sports organisations, have clear, robust policies, procedures, and work together effectively to support vulnerable children. Next slide. Okay, so I'm not going to get too much into the detail of this, but just suffice it to say, we have one of the ways to make sure that we all work together effectively is to run a number of what we call subgroups, where we look at specific topics and make sure that we deliver projects, make sure that we roll out training, all of which is to improve the quality of safeguarding practice within the borough. Next slide, please. Okay, we focus very much on some key priorities. The way we find out about our priorities is that we do consultation with the public, with our groups, with our partners, just to find out what are the key issues that they think are affecting children. And what we decided is, taking all the analysis, that some of the key things affecting children in Merton is domestic abuse, neglect, contextual safeguarding, which is looking at adolescents and the risk they might have outside their home, mental health and well-being, as we all know that post-COVID there's been an increase in mental health issues, and also focusing on early help and prevention, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it's useful for us to have a conversation with sports organisations in the borough, because sports and is a really good way to prevent and support children whilst they're sort of in the early stages of their lives, and making sure that we prevent them for any extra harm occurring. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to go over this just to sort of say these are some of the things that we do. You'll see it on the slides. That gives us an idea of the way we operate. Next slide. Okay, and this is just an overview of some of the things we've achieved over the last year. So a lot of things, as I mentioned, is around doing projects, working, rolling out training, doing work with schools to make sure that they can support children, and making sure that all our work is publicly accountable and transparent. So it's just a sort of brief overview of the range of types of work we do, focusing very much on our priorities: contextual safeguarding, domestic abuse, mental health, etc. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is kind of, I guess, in the main way the thing for us to focus on. Very much like Catherine, our job is to focus on training and welfare. So training and sending out resources. So as I said, we're not a direct service provider. So just as John said, if they've got concerns about a worker, then obviously there's a ladder service, which we elaborated on. Now, if you've got specific concerns about a child, then the first port of call is our child and family hub, which you can email with any concerns. There's more details about what they do on our website, but broadly they will listen. If necessary, they'll give advice. And certainly, and if there's any serious concerns, they will obviously go ahead and carry out an investigation. There is, child welfare is a wide-ranging issue, and children can display a number of behaviours. So I think the most important thing is if you have a concern about a child, even if you've got any doubts, it is worth having a consultation. They will speak to you, they will give advice, but it is better to raise an issue rather than try and deal with it yourself. So if there's anything that you're concerned about, nervous about, it is really worth going to them as a first point of call. The first thing that they do, I know a lot of people get very concerned that, you will inform social services, and then the immediate step after that is them looking to take a child away. And it really isn't like that. The first point of call is always, the first thing that they offer is always support, advice, and the hope and the plan is always, as far as possible, to keep families together, to keep the child in a safe and in a familiar environment. So I would always urge you to make sure that you raise any concerns and not be too worried about getting people in trouble or anything like that. Other things but what the MSCP can offer you, we've got a range of training, and that's not just in-person training. We have online training, e-resources, etc. So it's always worth having a look at our website and seeing what's available, because there's sometimes things you can do, like just do some short training that will enable you to understand basic safeguarding issues, as well as sort of more specialist and elaborate. All voluntary sectors in the borough are able to access our training, so please, as I said, do check out our website. We also publish a range of reports about some of the activities we do, so that's a way of learning, improving your safeguarding knowledge. We hold a number of meetings to involve our partners, for example, this, telling people what we do, telling them how we can help them, and hopefully also listening to them about their concerns so that we can make sure that when we develop our policies, our training, etc., it's really meeting the needs that exist in the borough. We have a range of policies and procedures that can help you run your organisation more effectively. As Catherine said, one of the really key things that you guys need to think about in terms of your organisations is having safeguarding policies so that if anything happens, everybody in the borough is aware of what to do. And then finally, we do publish a newsletter to keep you up to date with issues in Merton. So if you go to our website, you're able to look at the resources that we have available, and also sign up to our web newsletter, which will give you ongoing useful information. And that's it. So I will now hand over to Helena.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Helena. I'm a sport welfare officer at London Sport. And so basically my role, I help safeguard and improve safeguarding practice in sports clubs and community physical activity groups. And so my role, I cover Southwest London, which means that I'm here today covering working with Merton, and there's a team of 5 of us across London. So we have split up London based on the different areas. And if you could just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so we work with clubs and sports groups at a local level, but also with national governing bodies, local authorities, organisations, at all different kinds of levels. And we offer free additional support that goes alongside what the governing bodies and what organisations and councils offer. So if you could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just to clarify, we are not case management officers. So we do not deal with the specific cases that would be referred to the LADO, John, that spoke earlier. Instead of reacting to when you hear a case of abuse, we are more preventative. We are trying to prevent abuse from happening. So if there are issues that arise within a club or in a sports group, we are there to try and stop that from reoccurring. How can we prevent harm and promote good practice moving forward? So if you can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. That'd be great. So you can see how, as I mentioned, how we split up London. So I cover Southwest boroughs in the left. And on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we have 4 main aims of our work, and that is to connect, support, raise awareness and enable. So on the next slide, I'll go through each of them in a bit more detail. So one of our big things is to connect club welfare officers and community groups of organisations. So basically my role was created from the White Review, which found that there was systemic abuse in gymnastics, and that was released a few years ago. And Sport England decided that my role needed to be created to help connect welfare officers. So they found that people in a welfare role within a club didn't feel connected to other clubs, didn't share best practice, felt quite isolated. So that was one of the reasons our role was created. And so there's now over 65 of us across England working in this space. And we're all trying to share best practice, because everyone in sport and physical activity should be prioritising people's safety and sharing what works well, basically. And the next part of our aims is support. So that's our big piece of work that we do. So in terms of what support we deliver, we host forums and workshops on different topics based on what the needs are and what we recognise from doing research with clubs and groups. We deliver CPD training, and I'll talk more on that in a second, and what different types of training we provide. We also do a lot of awareness raising events based on different topics that have come up in the media. And we also do direct club support. So that can look like by going on visits, completing a safeguarding audit, looking at how the club or the group's policies and procedures, whether they're up to date, whether their processes are correct, and also providing guidance and resources. And along with that audit, we also conduct reviews of policies, and we also have availability to edit and write some of those policies as well if that's needed. And so we're not replacing what a governing body has told you to do. Instead, we work alongside them, and we provide that additional extra support that the governing body might not be able to provide. And if you don't have a governing body and you're in a community group, we can be that source of support as well. And then, as I mentioned, we raise awareness of those welfare issues, and also the importance of both safeguarding children and adults in all sport spaces. And finally, with all that information and that knowledge and that support, we will enable club welfare officers and community groups to create that safe, inclusive sporting environments. And on the next slide, you can see the different types of training that we offer. So this is not a complete list. We are evaluating and changing this all the time. We have internal expertise within my team. So myself and my 4 other sport welfare officers, we have different backgrounds based on our knowledge and our awareness, so we can deliver different training on different topics. And but when we don't have that knowledge and awareness, we hire external providers to deliver that specific training that they are qualified to deliver. So because our services are all fully funded by Sport England, we do have a budget to be able to provide training with external providers and use that funding. And again, every service that we provide and every training that we offer is all free. And we can make the training sessions specifically tailored to what the community group or the sporting organisation needs and what has been identified as a potential area of improvement. And then on the next slide, you can see some of our upcoming events. So actually, after this forum today, I'll be leading our first bystander awareness training. So that is to help people become active bystanders. So that basically means helping people to know what to do if they spot inappropriate behaviour and be able to handle that and challenge it. So that's one of the sessions we'll be leading today, and if that goes well, then we'll hopefully be delivering more of those training sessions. And you can also see some other sessions we have coming up as well. And this is not, again, not a complete list. We're growing and adding to this all the time, and these are events that are open to everyone across London, but we also do events that happen specifically in our areas. And I'll put a link in the chat in a second with a link to how to sign up to these events and our website as well, which has more details. And then I think on the final slide, so yeah, I'd like to get your feedback today. So if anyone has their phone and can take a get their phone and take a photo of the QR code, it will send you to a link to a questionnaire, and we really appreciate you completing that. There's a section on the different challenges you may face in your sports clubs and your roles, and that really helps us shape our future training and events and sessions. And if you would like any further support as well, you can add your email address and name, and I can reach out to you directly. So yeah, please complete that. That'd be great. And I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Next page has got our details on it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Helena, and thank you to all of our speakers. Really appreciate them giving up the time to speak on such an important topic this evening. So we're just going to open up for questions, and we've already had some questions come through, so we'll respond to those. But if there's any other reflections or questions that participants on the call tonight would like to ask, please pop them in the chat, and we'll try and get through as many questions as possible. The first couple, I may hand just directly over to David, David Gentles, who's our head of sport and leisure, who's just going to go through two of the first questions. So I hand over to him to respond to those.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, the first question from anonymous participant. Could you clarify if biological males who identify as females are allowed to access female-only spaces? Example, sports changing rooms and toilets that girls might be using. Are single-sex spaces available to safeguard biological girls? Now, this is a very topical subject that is recently had certain national governing bodies. So some of you will have seen people like Leah Thomas in the press, who is an international swimmer who transitioned fairly recently. Initially, World Aquatics were allowing Leah to compete in international competition, and then that was recently changed. So there is no standard guidance across the sports sector in terms of what organisations should be doing related to this subject. However, if you are affiliated to a national governing body, most national governing bodies will provide guidance for sports organisations in terms of how you balance the need for inclusion as well as the health and safety issues related. So if you are affiliated to a national governing body, I would suggest you look at their guidance. Otherwise, if you're not, and many people operate in clubhouses that haven't got the luxury of having spaces that could be designated for those people who identify as a different sex to they were born in. So I would suggest that just some robust plans were put in place and risk assessments to kind of address the likelihood that there could be a conflict in those environments. If there's anyone else on the panel who has got any experience in terms of maybe other sectors, schools, other environments that they want to come in, then let me know.
The only thing I was going to say was that looking at some guidance here, and I don't know if, can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. That in 2022, and this is the Equality and Human Rights Commission under the Equality Act, people who didn't have a gender recognition certificate, and I think there's fewer than 5,000 people in the UK who do, could be excluded from single-sex services or facilities, including toilets and changing rooms, if it's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So I think that's the example given is a community centre where there are separate male and female toilets, and in a survey of that centre, people said they wouldn't use the centre if the toilets were open to members of the opposite biological sex. The reasons given were for reasons of privacy and dignity, or because of religious belief, and they introduced a gender neutral toilet and invited that person to use the gender neutral toilet or the toilet for their biological sex. The only other thing that I would add to that is the question that was up there. I just wanted to be clear as well that what I saw the phrase girls and then biological males. There shouldn't really be any circumstances where adults are entering changing rooms where children are present, unless that's very specific within a school for whatever reason, supportive or. But yeah, I don't know if that helps at all.
I was just going to add as well that we have a duty to safeguard everyone, so that includes trans women and non-binary individuals.
Yeah.
So in kind of against, in a way, getting people to think about how spaces can be inclusive for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you everyone. The next question is something that we'll touch on later. It's related to funding, so I'll do a section on funding later on. What I would say, in addition to some of the funding that's been requested, and this particularly around Tennis for Free charity, we have got 25 equip boxes. Now, we were the first borough in the country to onboard an organisation called Equip, and essentially they're equipment boxes that are free and low cost, and they are 25 of them across parks and open spaces in our borough. So don't always think that to increase participation, people need to be equipped with kind of new equipment. This is a very exciting project for the next 2 years that we need to demonstrate that, you know, it's really having an impact. But I'll be talking a little bit later on about funding, so we'll cover it then, if that's okay. Yep. So if there are no more questions related to safeguarding, just wanted to thank all the members of the panel. I was previously a safeguarding lead at London Sport, and I know how important, and quite often, if you're not registered as a kind of affiliate of a national governing body, there's very little support out there. So hopefully people that have provided information today will help, even if it just protects one person or makes one person think to do something that they hadn't considered previously. Then, you know, we're definitely doing our job with Borough of Sport. So let's move on to other business related to Borough of Sport. As Anthony said, David Gentle's Head of Sport and Leisure, for those who I haven't met. Next slide. So just going through some things that we are kind of prioritising for this coming year. So in addition to the main Borough of Sport priorities, which for those of you who've been familiar for the last 18 months, the 4 to 16-year-olds, the over 65s are the kind of embedded demographic priorities. In a recent Borough of Sport advisory group, we also decided for this year in particular, because of the Women's World Cup and other kind of high profile international women and girls events coming to England and taking place across the world, we're going to have an additional focus on girls and women's inclusion for this year. As I touched on, we've got a partnership with Equip, who are providing those 25 equipment boxes across the borough. We were delighted that they've been shortlisted for a London Sport Award taking place in a couple of weeks' time. So if anyone, there are some tickets available, I believe, if anyone wants to go along and cheer these Merton organisations or organisations delivering in Merton. And then also we were delighted Clarion Futures did an excellent job supporting our first year of our Borough of Sport grants, and we were delighted that they've also been shortlisted for the business contribution, the London Sport Award. So watch this space, fingers crossed in a couple of weeks we'll have a couple of gold medals come back to Merton. As Anthony touched on previously, we've had 2 successful years of the Big Sports Day. This year we have a plan for the Big Sports Day to move around the borough, and this year we're delighted to announce that on the Sunday the 7th of September at Morden Park will be this year's iteration. We do engage with local organisations, so again, keep connected. There will be a time we'll be looking at organisations that want to showcase some of the great stuff that goes on in the borough to take part and even attend on the day as participants. I'll be touching a little bit more detail in a minute, but we are going to be announcing the launch of our second year of the Borough of Sport Grants Fund, due to open on April the 2nd for just over a month. I'll be going through a bit more detail in a little while about the criteria. A lot of learning from year one that will hopefully give organisations a kind of leg up and the ability to kind of maximise their chances of getting that funding. And then also, as Catherine talked about, you know, training and upskilling of organisations in terms of how they engage with and how they kind of create opportunities for those people that are less active. We will be hosting 2 courses around disability awareness and thinking about adaptations that we can make to include people with disabilities, and then thinking also about some of the challenges and some of the opportunities for those who are neurodiverse within our communities that maybe don't take part. They might have barriers around taking part in mainstream sports and physical activity opportunities, and this will just give you some really insightful training in terms of how to engage with those people to kind of broaden the activity base. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to our funding for year 2 of the Borough of Sports. As I mentioned, we'll be looking particularly at projects that engage 4 to 16-year-olds and 65 and overs. It's very much around looking at how we engage and help underrepresented groups or marginalised groups to become more active, and very much around helping children or adults in the least affluent parts of Merton. So very simply, and I know it's not quite as simple as this, but you'll all be aware that the east of the borough, kind of from Morden town centre eastwards, people are less likely to be active, and then moving west more likely to be active. Now that is nuanced. There are certain groups, so people with disabilities generally are as inactive or as active in the east and the west. So that's a very simplistic kind of measure, but often, you know, if you are delivering kind of things in and around Pollard's Hill and Mitcham, those are more likely to engage with less active communities. So again, going back, sorry, Jana, going back, if we can go back. So just some really top tips, things that we've learned from last year is this isn't a case of, you know, you put in a funding bid and then you kind of hope for the best about how you can demonstrate that you're going to capture the kind of people you aimed at. So we really, really want to see in your applications that you have knowledge of your local area and what people want in that local area. Think about what exists in provision. I think we had an application last year for an activity taking place in an area that was actually replicating something else that was already going on. So make sure you kind of look at what's going on in your local area, speak to your local communities to get that real insight in terms of what is needed, and then having a real plan to engage residents. So I know quite often it's speculative. You know, last year we had 46 applications for 23 that ended up getting funded. This year we expect that ratio to be a lot lower. You know, a lot more people applying and not much more money in the pot. So really think about, if you were successful with the funding, how you're going to engage residents to make sure that those projects are successful as they can be. Next slide, please. Okay, so who can apply? So these are some fairly standard kind of groups that many public funded organisations kind of include that are eligible. So you need to be a constituted community group or a registered charity, company limited by guarantee, or the PTA or Friends of School group. We're not including obviously curriculum delivery within that, so it would have to be around how you engage in students around kind of extracurricular opportunity, preferably linked to community clubs and organisations, and then obviously social enterprises and community interest companies. All who are working not for profit and benefit of Merton residents. Okay, so that's really key. So there is a very strong desire from the administration to not, I mean, we're not going to ask for people's postcodes and to prove it, but we need to be making sure that these are opportunities that are primarily, if not exclusively, for Merton residents. Next slide, please. Okay, just a little bit about the types of things that funding are for. Now, the previous question was about funding tennis equipment for tennis for free. That absolutely would be included as an eligible item. If it was providing coaching and activation opportunities for people who are less active and who want to participate in more physical activity, not just kind of coaching or not just kind of continuation of something that already exists to subsidise existing activities. So as that question was, yes, it can include equipment, so potentially tennis rackets, tennis balls, things to help activities take place. It can include service alterations. So some of the really good examples last year of activities that were successful were groups of people that kind of connected with groups that were less active in the community. So they might be a lunch club. They didn't do physical activity before, but actually, you know, before people get lunch and be able to have the natter, they're taking part in an hour of chair-based activities beforehand. So again, it's not necessarily about new activity, it's about how we can connect existing groups to encourage them to be more active in their environments. It can include startup and extension costs. So this potentially could include if it was, for example, you wanted to do trampolining, or you wanted to do something that was related to a specific like a cricket net, then it would include obviously contribution towards that facility hire and overheads. It could include, you know, one of the questions that's going to be in the applications around sustainability. One of the really good ways of demonstrating sustainability is thinking about how you can train individuals, either as participants or volunteers or people that are connected with your organisation, how you can train them to become qualified and experienced and confident to be able to undertake those activities on an ongoing basis. So that can be included, and certainly I would encourage it as part of a funding bid. And then this isn't a capital funding, so this isn't about building new buildings or making significant physical alterations. But, you know, if it is about a simple thing, you know, about maybe there's a step to a building and you want to include people with mobility issues, then, you know, a little ramp at the beginning, or something around improving lighting, or something around some minor alterations that are going to make your projects more successful would be eligible. Next slide, please. Okay, just a shout out for a few other things. So for those of you who aren't currently connected to what's going on in Merton related to Borough of Sport, there is a Sports Leaders in Merton, which is going to be the new bulletin that will be coming out on a regular basis. So there is a link on the slides which will be distributed afterwards. So do sign up for that. It will be where you will find first-hand details of how to apply for grants, how to connect with our big sports day, and everything else that's going on around some of the training and things that we've spoken about. So do sign up for that. Next slide, please. And then finally, who would have believed it? You know, it only seems like yesterday that Merton was born. Now we're going to be turning 60 in a couple of weeks, and there are going to be 5 weeks worth of really exciting opportunities for everyone in Merton to engage with all sorts of different things. We can only hope that the weather turns nice, so everyone wants to be out and about, enjoying our parks and open spaces and all the activities we're going to be running. It starts in the beginning of April and runs with a big culmination of a large festival on Morden Park on the 5th of May. So definitely keep an eye out for that. There's a large bulletin going out tomorrow, and there are actually, if you're lucky enough to be a Merton resident, there is an opportunity to take part in a lot of the activities for free. So watch this space on that one. And then, so just to close, so we will take some more questions. So while we're kind of looking at questions that come in, there is a website to connect with Borough of Sport. Just a reminder, you know, there's no set time frame, set dates that we put this forum in. It is the forum for people that are working and people that are operating. So it is your forum. So if you have any ideas in terms of topics or subjects or things that you want us to cover in a future forum, then please do suggest them to us, because what we don't want to do is think that we know everything that you want to know about, and we always drive the content and then just hope for the best that people will turn up. So this subject in particular I was very passionate about to have on the agenda, but certainly future forums will be based on really what the need is that's demonstrated from you in the community. So let's see if there are any more questions. Yeah, so let's go down. Okay. Will the sport priority group focus on women and girls, ensure that they're competing against biologically females only and not being forced to compete against biological males? So the funding, if you're talking about specifically about the funding, very much the ethos of Borough Sport and the Borough Sport funding is around getting people more active, less about the competition. So I would certainly say that it's something that we'll be aware of, but it's very unlikely, you know, as a first point of entry into being active, we're going to be kind of funding activities that are around kind of, you know, competition. So it's certainly something, as we spoke about, there is a lot of guidance out there. If it does come to that, we'll be taking each application on its merits, but certainly we wouldn't want to be in a situation where we're going to be creating kind of health and safety issues. However, you know, Borough of Sport is around being inclusive, and we want to make sure that people aren't excluded from any aspects of Borough of Sport. And then last one, yeah, of course, yoga, hot yoga, always considered as a sport, even active gardening. So Sport England do have a long list of over 230 sports that are considered as a sport. Now, we're going to be generally following that guidance. However, you know, with the Borough of Sport grant, we're going to be a little bit more discretionary. You know, if it's something that's going to be raising people's heart rates and getting them more active, then we'll be considering it. If it's something like, you know, underwater hockey, which is a sport, believe it or not, there is a process that people want to have something that's on the margins of being a sport to officially get recognised. However, here in Borough of Sport, we have a much more relaxed approach to what is a sport and what isn't. So thank you for that question. Okay, so you have our email address. If that's it from everyone in terms of questions, thank you so much for spending your time with us. We hopefully will see you. We'll hopefully have a long, hot and sunny summer. See you out and about in our community. And thank you for joining us, and see you again soon.